Welcome back, Fleur community. Happy Wednesday. I hope everyone's doing well. And yes, today is actually the day of the first community call here. And it's starting very soon. I mean, what time are we on now? 13 minutes away. We're going to jump in and see what they're talking about. Looks like they have some good things to talk about here. They've got a presentation. So it looks like they're going to be streaming it on Twitter, and it's not a Twitter space. So basically, I asked in the Discord community if anyone would be interested in me streaming this, and a lot of people said yes. So we're going to do that, and yeah, I'm going to be, I guess, muted, but I'll be typing in the chat as well, and we can sort of have a little bit of a discussion as the stream is going on. So yeah, it's due in about 10 minutes. And yes, they got special guests. And from what I'm aware, I think this is various signal providers, because there have been a number of signal providers who are asking the community to answer questions. So, and yes, there is obviously Hugo here. We've got Ilan, who is one of the lead developers. We got Max. This guy, Segfault Zabi, and finally Luca. Interesting. And yeah, I guess we're going to just see what happens. I mean, see if we can get any other information over here. All looks good. Yes, here we go, the agenda. So we're going to meet the team, as we just mentioned above. Fleur's vision, focus, and protocols. So that's going to be going into layer cake and the state connector, all that good stuff. Fleur's vision is obviously to connect everything. That is their tagline. You can see it here. And, you know, I think people really don't understand the gravity of that. Connecting everything is no easy task. And for that reason, no one's ever done it before. So it's going to be interesting to see them really talk about it, because the Fleur team are obviously very passionate, and it's going to be great to see, or maybe get some technical discussion, as we can see here, tech discussion with special guests. So I'm looking forward to trying getting into some nitty gritty and some of the more finer details, a little bit more granular. While we wait, I guess we can look at some recent news. I did actually see this earlier, about 2 hours ago, from Flintstone, and just a heads up that the Canary Dollar Farm Pool will actually be becoming obsolete sooner or later. So that's something to note. What else do we have here? I was talking about the correlation between YouTube views and the price. They're very correlated, unfortunately. And I think everyone that's watching now and everyone that's still active within the community, good things are coming. It's really interesting to see that people really like to watch videos and learn about things when the price is going up. And, you know, that's the reason why most people are on the wrong side of the trade. It's the people who are buying low and selling high, not who are learning about a network in these areas here where the traffic towards the YouTube channel is really high, because that's when the price is highest, and that's when people are buying at all-time highs. And a lot of the people that got in here are very salty. But at the end of the day, fundamentally, you know, the network has only grown stronger and stronger with each day that passes. It's been widely adopted. You know, more decentralized applications are being built on top of it, and that's where people down here, including myself, have been accumulating some more and basically bringing down my average entry price. Yes, Hugo says today's community call is shaping up to be a marathon. He's excited to communicate in depth what we've been working on with the community. Connect everything. Happy days. Some people may have missed this. The XFi airdrop is here on Uphold, finally. It took them a while, but if you were eligible, you should have received some XFi roundabout now. I guess something else we can just quickly glance over before we start here is the Cooties project. Now, the Cooties project, you can maybe able to see this here. I've got my own little Fleur community arcade machine. There's Death Rangers. And yeah, I'm actually going to have Thoth, who is the, I guess, the creator of the Cooties. He's going to be joining us tomorrow on the latest podcast episode. And he's got a lot of things going on. You know, it's not just the Cooties in the sense of these NFTs. There's going to be a lot more going on behind the scenes. And here's just one example. You can actually stake the Genesis collection and earn some of these reward tokens. Coot. So yeah, we're going to be talking all about that. And yeah, it's definitely something to look forward to. Apolio is asking where is the call? So the call is, it's not necessarily a call. It's going to be a stream. And it's going to happen here today in just 5 minutes time from Fleur's Twitter account. So I imagine it's going to be something like a Periscope. And it's basically just a live stream on Twitter. Either way, we're going to be tuning in here and watching it together. I'm going to be in the chat and we're going to, I guess, talk amongst ourselves. I'm actually just going to quickly get a notepad. I'll be back in a second because I do want to take some notes on this and make some notes of any important points. Okay, I am back. Got my notepad ready. Pen ready, and I guess we're just waiting for the Fleur team, like they said, 3 p.m. UTC. There's a lot of people in the house today. Always great to have the chat nice and lively. And I'm not sure if you guys noticed, I did just simplify the overlays so that we can get a bit of a full picture of what's going on here. Looks like there's a new FTSO on the scene, FTSO London. Looking to be an assertion provider. Looks like they're connecting to all kinds of integrated chains. Crypto Granny in the house. Hope you don't have a hangover from all the champagne you was drinking the other day. Yes, Sharkan. That's right. The Bitrue Fleur IOU is just an IOU. You can see it here. It's an IOU, but it will basically be redeemed for the real thing once the network launches. Looks like it's flattening out a bit here. You'd hope so. Anyway, this was, I guess the last time we saw prices like this was, what did we see there? February. Late to mid-February. Yeah, there is the Fat Leopard minting today. I'm not personally minting any. I do have some fat cats myself, so I'm actually due some. So I'm going to wait for the airdrop, hopefully get something special. I guess we'll wait and see. Steve has said that he's never done anything with his SGB. The first thing I would do is start delegating it. You can actually earn, I guess, like a passive income. So it's an inflationary asset at 10% each year, and then rewards are given to those who delegate. So be sure to do that. I mean, if you go to FTSO AU, let me see. Can't remember the URL, but yeah, if you go to this website here, they have a great interface here, ftso.au. Click on delegate at the top, and basically you just wrap your songbird into wrapped songbird, and then you're gonna be able to go to this delegate tab and basically say who you want to delegate to. And delegation towards these signal providers are basically saying that you believe that they're going to provide accurate prices to the Fleur time series oracle. And the oracle being the thing which, I guess, pushes prices out to the network at regular intervals every 3 minutes. Speaking of 3 minutes, we've got 3 minutes left until we can get this show on the road. Give it a quick refresh just in case they decided to start the party early. Nope, looks good. Everyone wants interoperability. Flare Network solves this. That's true. You know, this is a really big problem in the crypto space. Interoperability, I mean, there's existing bridges, but nothing like what Flare's doing. And that's, for me, what makes the Flare Network and Songbird so special. I'm sure we're going to hear all about that today, actually, with the state connector here and the layer cake. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure if this is, not sure when it's going to start, but yeah, like I said, I think it's going to be a Periscope thing. John Doe, what exchange is easiest to purchase Songbird? It depends which exchanges you're already registered to, because there are many that are actually trading it now. I personally use BitTrue. There is a link in the description if you do want to register. It does help the channel out immensely. Polio asking how many total Spark tokens will there be? 100 billion initially, gradually released over time, but then there is the 10% inflation as well each year. So it's an ever expanding supply, but there are going to be deflationary attributes too. But I think overall it's going to be growing in supply as time goes on. Hey, we've got Martin from Africa in the house. We go, 1 minute to go. I wonder if they they've got something scheduled to start on the hour. In fact, let me check my phone because I do have my notifications set. I'm not too sure on Ethereum inflation, to be honest. Yeah. Almost abandoned Ethereum, to be honest, since Songbird's come out. Not that I ever really used it in the first place, but fees are ridiculous. I did see something from, who was it? I think it was a woman called Wendy on Twitter before, and she was talking about it was costing $20 to send $10 worth of Ethereum. Nothing yet. There we go. It's 4 o'clock. Let's see. RC, I don't think we can see the airdropped leopards yet. I think there's something that's going to happen at a later date. Here we go, guys. Okay, beautiful. Zero viewers, we're here. Let's wait till this gets started. Can't hear anything yet, but I'm sure we will be able to soon. In fact, I'm going to give it a quick refresh just to make sure. There we go. Lots of people watching, connect everything. I think we're just waiting for them to get settled. And what I will do is I will put this full screen and I will silence my microphone, and then we can just go from there and yeah, watch it together. I will be in the chat. I'll also be taking notes. So yeah, I'm excited to see what they have, and I'm intrigued to see how how long this is going to last, actually, because it sounds like they've got a lot to talk about. May as well close some of these tabs while we're waiting. There we go. Beautiful. John Doe asking, will Songbird be use increase with the Flare launch? I guess so. I think it's a good testing ground for people who may want to get familiar with Songbird or the Flare network, you know, and there'll definitely be a lot of applications which are launching on Songbird at first. So keep your eyes open for that. What time are we on? Oh, here we go. I did actually have this muted. There we go. We got some beats going on here in the background. Mona, is there anything in particular that you would like to know? I know a lot of it sounds complicated at first, but you know, sometimes it's just the terminology. I do actually have a video on terminology, which is very good if you're just jumping into the Flare or Songbird network, getting an idea of what some of these words actually mean. You know, delegation and I guess like all of the different protocols and stuff. It can be overwhelming at first. There's no doubt about that. I think people that have already been in the space for a long time, they almost become a little bit naive of that fact. Should we give it a quick refresh? Loading for a long time. We're on this wait screen for a while. Yes, about the Samurai NFTs, they will actually be migrated to the Songbird network, I believe, in Flare Finance's latest tweet. Adrian asking if the FTSO rewards will ever increase back to the levels of the past. I doubt it very much, because they was so high in the beginning because not everyone was delegating, right? Only a small percentage of the Songbird in circulation was being delegated because many of the exchanges held quite a lot of it. And now that more exchanges have released their Songbird, there's more Songbird being delegated, which means that the rewards are actually shared out between the same amount of rewards are shared out between more people. Oh, they do like to tease us. Let's see. Yeah, that's not a bad shout, John Doe. I do love the rewards on BitTrue. I don't actually. Oh, here we go. I think it looks like the party's about to get started. Right, so let me just double check here that we're. There we go.
And the warmest of welcomes to you all for joining the inaugural Flare community call. My name is Dominic Moore. I joined Flare as head of ecosystem in August last year. I'm responsible for leading the ecosystem work at Flare, which brought in grants, investments, and strategic partnerships, really focusing on Flare's mission to partner with engineers who deeply understand the importance of building on a layer 1 blockchain with native cross-chain interoperability. I have over 5 years experience in blockchain, and prior to Flare, I led ecosystem growth at Outlier Ventures, Europe's leading Web3 accelerator. A phenomenal amount of you on this call have been supporting Flare for some time, and some of you are extremely valued investors and partners. From all the team, we thank you for your foresight, dedication, and support in propelling Flare towards a monumentally exciting future. Every day, I learn something new about the awesome potential of Flare's technology, which means those of you that are new or staying up late to tune in or just curious to learn more about the potential of blockchain technology, I assure you will not be disappointed. So today is going to be a bit of an extravaganza, and ensuring we take the time with you to deeply explain the innovations and incentives that are baked into Flare to cascade a new wave of developer adoption. The strength of our community is what matters most. And please consider this a second dawn, because there'll now be many more calls, meetups, and exciting community programs and initiatives being launched over the coming months. We'll be kicking off proceedings by introducing you to a handful of the team to explain who they are and what they're doing. After the team's intros, Flare's CEO and co-founder Hugo will recap the vision and what Flare are building, with a dive into Layer Cake, as well as outlining the key milestones in our roadmap. Ilan and Alan will be fascinating insights behind the successful rollout of the Flare Time Series Oracle, aka FTSO. And then we're going to have a dive into the game-changing potential of the State Connector with Javi, supported by a live demo of the State Connector in action powered by Luca. Then we'll conclude with a Q&A with some of our special guests from our community. Okay, now it's time to hand over to Max to get the engineering team intro started.
What's up, Flare community? Nice to meet all of you. I'm Max Folder. I'm a distributed systems engineer on the Flare team, and I'm heading the network team over at Flare. So we are responsible for the node software that is running the Flare network, which means we are developing in the Go programming language. Our current focus is interfacing the smart contract systems with the consensus layer, so that's the Flare Time Series Oracle and the State Connector. And we're also working on optimizing consensus algorithm itself. Previously, I've been active in blockchain technology since the early days of Bitcoin, and I've been working on Flow Network, where I was leading the networking team as well. So I've been one of the lead developers driving the implementation of the Flow Network, including things such as peer-to-peer networking, consensus algorithm integration, and the storage layer. Today, I'm mostly here just for the Q&A, but I can't wait to tell you more about what we have in store regarding the network and the consensus algorithm in the future. Nice to meet all of you. And then with that, I think we head to Alan.
Hello, Flare community. I'm Alan. I joined Flare a year ago as a lead system engineer. I come from Slovenia, like several members of our smart contract team. I have PhD in mathematics. For over 20 years, I have been involved in a mix of engineering, academic, and entrepreneurial works. I have co-founded 3 companies where I acted as a CTO. We worked in various fields where mathematicians with strong computer science and engineering skills can give the world better and innovative solutions. This includes optimizations, artificial intelligence, advanced ride-sharing, analytics, and crypto exchanges. I work on smart contracts at Flare, on system design and testing, analytics, and currently I'm leading the development of the attestation client to support the State Connector protocol. Nice meeting you, community.
Awesome, Alan. Thank you very much. Over to you, Ilan.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Hi, Flare community. I feel very honored to be here, working for Flare and talking to the community. My role is leading the smart contract team. We are building a lot of innovative products for Flare. One of them being the FTSO, which was successfully launched. Oh, I think everyone needs someone. Thank you. Our first product we launched was the FTSO, which is, we will later discuss, but it's like, I think, an amazing Oracle protocol that has not been built before. Our next products that we plan to deliver soon are the F assets first and the attestation providers for the State Connector, which are both trying to solve the most burning problems of the blockchain today, meaning Oracle problem, and the second is the bridging problem, which a lot of companies are trying to solve now. Previously, I've been working for Kyber. I was part of the team that launched one of the first DEXs on Ethereum, the Kyber network DEX. And later, I was leading the smart contract team for Kyber until I joined Flare 1.5 years ago. And that's me, but I have to say a few words about our team. I've been working for software building for 20 years, and the team I'm working with now is the most amazing team I ever worked with. A lot of PhDs in mathematics. The critical thinking is, oh yeah, we want the team page. The critical thinking capacity for this team is amazing, and I'm really honored to have such a team near me and working with me. We're launching, and I feel very confident about all the products we're building now. As I said, it's all novel products. We're building everything from zero, and I feel very good with this team launching those products. And I think that is it. Who is next?
Thank you, Ilan. Luca, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. So hello, everybody. I'm Luca Albrecht. I've been working with Flare for over a year now as a part of smart contract team. I also come from Slovenia, just like Alan. I have a master's in mathematics and computer science, and I have been working with various startups for over 5 years now that require mathematics and computer science as the main skill. Mostly artificial intelligence, machine learning, optimization problems, and stuff like that. And currently, I'm working on a state connector and attestation provider implementation here on with Flare.
That's awesome, Luca. Thank you so much. Over to the Spanish doctor.
Hi, everybody. I'm Xavi from sunny Barcelona, and I'm in charge of the technical documentation. My main goal at Flare is to have the best possible external documentation site, but I also take care of the internal education. So I make sure that all members of the team are up to speed with all the technologies that we handle here. I've got a PhD. I've been a developer for more than 20 years. I've been a technical writer for the past 5 years, and I've been in crypto for about 2 years now. Thanks, Dom. Back to you.
Awesome, Xavi. It's great working with you. Now on to some recent recruits to our ecosystem team. Take it away, Nick.
Hello, everybody. My name is Nick Campion, Flare as head of marketing just at the start of this year. My background is global communications, working at some of the cities around the world. I'm based in London, based in Amsterdam, and most recently in Melbourne, which does mean that it is genuinely right in the middle of my night at the moment. Before I jumped ship into the wonderful world of crypto, I was creating campaigns, clients like Intel, like Airbnb, Audi, and had a particular favorite of mine was 4 years running the advertising for EA Sports FIFA out of Amsterdam. My most important role at Flare is crafting the strategy that's going to get Flare noticed and valued. So taking advantage of that experience with the global brands. Amazing tech can only ever be part of the puzzle. So if people don't know about it or don't really understand it, then we're not going to grow at the rate that we should be. There's, as you'll see very soon, there's an awful lot of amazingness in this company and so many people with very, very big. So the first part of the task is all about clarity of messaging and making sure we're being sufficiently transparent. Thank you. I look forward to working and being here with everybody. I shall pass over to Sissy now.
Yep, I will take over. Hi, I'm Sissy. So I'm based in Amsterdam now. I just finished my MBA degree, and I have been working in crypto industry for around 5 years as community manager. So I worked with users day in and day out, and working with the internal team, marketing team, compliance team in my past. And I joined Flare just recently as grants associate. So I will be in charge of grants program and any community related projects. So I am really looking forward to seeing you all and working with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sissy. Now
Thanks,
for
Sissy.
Sorry, Max, where you go?
Oh, thanks, Dominic. Hi, everyone. I'm Max, the one who's switching between the slides at the moment. So thanks for bearing with me. It's great to be here, part of the Flare core team on our first community call. I'm looking after ecosystem growth, helping to find new projects that want to come and build on our network. Previously, I was in the DeFi world at a protocol called Alpha, and before that, I was making music. So in my first few months at Flare, I've been helping with the day-to-day marketing, attending conferences. You might have seen Dom and I were attending ETH Denver and managed to get over to Paris Blockchain Week recently. And I've been spending some time in the Discord, and I definitely recommend hopping in there if you'd like to learn more about building on Flare or just hang out with our community. And there's some incredible people there. And actually, on that note, I was chatting with Tom T, because he shared some amazing community content that's been created by the Flare community over the past years, and the vibe is awesome. And I'm really excited to see what the community creates over the coming months. On a side note, I'm looking into ways that we can enable the community to send each other Songbird in the Discord server itself, just so that we can show a little bit of love. So yeah, I'll be on the lookout for new content, and I'm sure the team is also stoked to see everything that you guys create. And finally, I'm excited for you all to hear about the team on this call. As Ilan said, as Nick said, as everyone's saying, like, it's incredible to work as part of a team where you have like 30 developers. It's just a handful of them presenting, but I'm really excited for you guys to discover the power of Flare. That's all from me. Thank you so much.
Great stuff, Max. Now, without any further ado, it's over to Hugo.
Thanks, Dominic. Max, if my screen isn't shared, would you please screen share it? Thank you.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to cover really what Flare is building. So first of all, what makes it unique and what those capabilities that are unique about it enable. So Flare is a layer 1. It's a layer 1 that runs the Ethereum virtual machine. That means it has smart contracts, like many blockchains that run the Ethereum virtual machine. And it's fast. But most importantly, it has two unique components that allow it to do things that no other blockchain can do. The first of that is a proof of stake based oracle for prices called the Flare time series oracle. And we've launched that on Songbird. And so far we have close to about 100 data providers. And that's been very successful so far. And the second, which is something that may even be slightly more interesting than the FTSO in the long run, is what we call the state connector. It comes to consensus over the state of external systems. So that can be a blockchain, or it can be an API from the internet. So a database with an API, an open API. Absolutely everything else that we're building follows from this set of things. An L1 with the EVM, the FTSO, and the state connector. And so I'm just going to run through very quickly, just a little more detail on the FTSO and the state connector. There'll be presentations on them a little later in a little more depth. So what the Flare time series oracle is doing is, at least in the first instance, it's solving for price. But in reality, it can solve for any probabilistic data set, which has a time series. And so what you do with your Songbird tokens currently, and what you will be doing with your Flare tokens in the future, is you'll be delegating them to price providers. As I said, since we launched Songbird, we have close to 100 of them. You delegate your tokens, and the price providers on your behalf put prices into the system. And those prices are aggregated in the FTSO smart contract. This forms a distribution. The smart contract cuts the tails of the distribution off. So it removes the top 25% and the lower 25% of prices, leaving it with the 50% in the middle. It then takes the weighted average median, weighted by your delegation, and that weighted average median gives us the price. It sounds simple, but there's a lot of game theory in it. But so far, it's been extremely useful and extremely robust. The system currently handles about 100 data providers, and I think about 15 or 16 different price series. We're looking at ways to upgrade that so that it can handle thousands of price providers and thousands of price series. And that's some of the work we're doing with Max Walter. The state connector is Flare's oracle for getting the state of any other system, whether that be a blockchain or a database. And it's really unlike anything else that's been built before. So it's the first real oracle with a real consensus protocol integrated. And I won't go too deeply on this because we have a great presentation from Xavi and a demo from Luca coming up. But what it does is it applies to consensus to an external system. And this gives us a much, much more robust way than we think anything else in the industry to be able to get data from an external system and use that with a smart contract on Flare. So with these tools, with the EVM blockchain that's fast, with the FTSO, and with the state connector, what are we focusing on first? So today, right now, earlier today, there's about $17 billion locked in bridges. And so we call that the $17 billion problem. But we think that'll be way more over time as those chains are just proliferating and proliferating. Subnets, supernets, all the various types of different blockchains. And as people search for performance, as applications come online, which are much more consumer focused rather than retail, much more consumer focused rather than DeFi focused, there's going to need to be much more highly performant blockchains. So we don't expect the proliferation of blockchains to stop anytime soon. So this leads us on to what's happened with bridges. Well, in the last year, there's been $1.55 billion hacked from bridges. Fortunately, in the case of the Poly network, that was handed back largely by the hacker. And luckily, in the case of Wormhole, the owners of that bridge covered the losses. But Ronin, I believe, we're still waiting to see if those losses come back. And that was a big and hard loss for the people who had to take it. And so we've been thinking a lot about bridges and what they need, how you can make bridges better. And we really think bridges have three things that they really must have. They must have insurance, and that's on-chain insurance. So there must be a way for a loss to be covered by collateral that is held on-chain. There's no point having insurance off-chain because you can't trust that the person who's providing it will actually give it over. You're back in the traditional financial system. They must have risk mitigation, and they must have decentralization. Some really nice to haves that make the bridging experience so much better for everyone else, for the users of it, and for the applications that are depending on it, is unified liquidity. And what this means is that you can bridge from any chain to a particular chain and have the same asset come out. And we'll cover what that means in a little more depth shortly. And they must have speed, because if they don't have speed, you'll miss a lot of the opportunities that comes from bridging. And so we focus on bridging first, but that isn't the sum total of what Flare's amazing FTSO and state connector protocols can do. We really think of a world of interoperability where you can deploy an application once on Flare, and because of Layer Cake and F assets, you can serve all the chains with a single deployment. Because of Layer Cake and F assets and the state connector, you can use information from all the chains and from external systems with a single deployment on Flare. And that's really powerful for the industry. Then we think of another type of bridging. It's not real bridging, you're not bridging a token, but there's a huge amount of information on Web 2 that's in open APIs. And this allows you to build applications. You can monetize Web 2 on Web 3. And so we call this Web 2 to Web 3 compatibility. We've got some really interesting examples of that coming up. I won't go too much into it, but think of being able to have a free to use game on the internet, but do something with the outcome of that game on a blockchain. So for instance, if you win that game, whoever you were playing against, you may be able to settle some kind of wager that you've had on that game. And these are the kind of examples we're thinking of. They're really powerful. So I just want to briefly go over the F assets. The F assets is our way of bridging non-smart contract tokens to Flare. And the non-smart contract tokens comprise about 65 to 70% of the value in the space. And we'll be initially integrating Bitcoin, Doge, XRP, XLM, Litecoin, Filecoin, and Algorand. And what this means is that you'll be able to mint onto Flare FBitcoin, FDoge, FXRP, and the rest. And you'll be able to use them with smart contracts. You'll be able to use them with payments. So for instance, with Bitcoin, one of the things everyone talks about is how do you make payments in Bitcoin when it's expensive to do so and slow? And with FBTC, you'll be able to do that. And there's a good paper on the F asset system on our website, so I won't go too deeply into it. There's also a very good blog for people less inclined to read papers. But we think it's a trustless system that's extremely useful and will bring a lot of value both to the network and to the users. So Layer Cake is our most recent innovation. And the most important thing is that it's a bridging system for smart contract networks. Not just to Flare from another smart contract network, not just from Flare to that smart contract network, but between all smart contract networks. So allowing you to bridge from Ethereum to Solana, from Cardano to Near, from Cosmos to Ethereum, from Terra to Flare, anywhere you want, in any direction, with unified liquidity. And that's really, really powerful. And so what I'm going to do now is take you through Layer Cake, in a relatively deep dive. Hopefully you'll find it interesting. So these are the key components of Layer Cake. I'm going to go through three things: speed and safety, the risk of chain reorganization, and scaling linearly versus quadratically. And what that means is not using bilateral bridging, and we'll come on to what that means and why it's interesting. So speed and safety, how to build fast, decentralized, and fully insured bridges. If you want to build a bridge between two chains, let's say chain A and chain B in this example, you need to have smart contracts on both sides and a relay system in between. And that relay system has generally been defined, and it's called a light client relay. And what a light client relay is doing is it's running a lightweight node on both the chains. And it runs a lightweight node because the cost of running a proper node is hard. And what it's doing is it's relaying the block headers between each chain. Now, the problem with only relaying the block headers is that you don't get the full richness of the data of the block. And so if you're only relaying the block headers, then you need to do a lot of additional checks. You need to do things like erasure encoding and data availability sampling to ensure that you're not being lied to about what you're seeing. And so the problem with the existing example of a trustless decentralized bridge is that they can only operate safely if they're operating slowly. There are other problems with this, but this is outside the scope of this presentation. And so this means two things. Decentralized transfers can only be done slowly, and this is really poor for usability. And the second thing it means, which may be more important actually, is that the relay model means that decentralized bridges have to be bilateral rather than multilateral. And that fragments liquidity. We'll come on to what fragmenting liquidity means shortly. It's a seriously big deal. And that's why largely bridging has been done by centralized bridges, multi-sig based bridges. So how do we propose to build a fast, decentralized, and fully insured bridge? Well, unlike a relay, the state connector on Flare can safely acquire the state of another chain. And it does it without just using block headers. It has all of the rich data from the block itself. And this is really important. And secondly, Flare is actually coming to consensus over what has happened on chain A in this example and chain B. And this lets us employ a mechanism to secure a fast moving bridge that uses Flare to secure it. And so this brings us on to the role of bandwidth providers in the Layer Cake system. And so let's take the example of a bridge from Ethereum to Solana that's bridging Ethereum to Solana. Bandwidth providers are the entities that operate the layer cake bridge. You don't have any trust in them. There's no reliance on them, and they're not holding your money. They just enable the bridge to speed up. And so for the first step, a bandwidth provider will mint slowly and securely onto Flare some amount of Ethereum to support the bridge. And in this example, I've said that the cumulative amount of Ethereum that is minted onto Flare is 500. And so what that 500 Ethereum means is that this is the maximum amount that can go across the bridge at any one time. And the way that is enforced is through smart contract. And so Flare receives this 500 Ethereum. It sits in the layer cake smart contract on Flare. And then Flare then communicates to both the smart contracts, the smart contract on Ethereum and the smart contract on Solana. And it says to those smart contracts, the bandwidth is 500 Ethereum. No more than 500 Ethereum may move between the bridge at any one time. So you may not remove more than 500 Ethereum from the Ethereum smart contract. You may not remove more than 500 wrapped Ethereum from the Solana smart contract. And this is really the crux of how layer cake works. And that we've specified this period as 1 hour initially, as we think that's a good amount of time for the whole system and the community to be able to observe what is happening on the bridge and for it to be shut down should there be any issue. Now, the bandwidth providers, having supplied 500 units of ETH as bandwidth, now operate the bridge. And a user comes to the bridge contract on Ethereum, gives it some ETH plus a fee that the bandwidth providers receive, and they get Solana ETH on Solana. The bandwidth providers under the happy path enable that to happen. Now, if the bandwidth providers are dishonest and mint for themselves, the total loss from their dishonesty can only equal the amount of bandwidth held as collateral, held on Flare as collateral. And this is what we mean by insurance. The bandwidth providers are able to move a certain amount of Ethereum between the bridges. And if they steal that Ethereum in the moving of it, then the amount held as collateral is used to reimburse the contract. And it reimburses the contract 100%, not 90%, not 50%, 100%. Because the contracts are limited by how much bandwidth is provided as collateral. Additionally, the dishonest bandwidth providers can be removed very easily from the system. And most importantly, if all the bandwidth providers are dishonest or they all disappear for some reason, their computers go down, the whole system doesn't freeze, it doesn't stop working, it doesn't disappear. It just reverts to being a slow relay-based system. And so that means your funds are never lost to you. It also means that no one is in control of your funds other than these decentralized networks. And it's all insured on Flare. And so let's just very briefly look at the example of most bridges today. So all they're really doing is putting a group of signatories between two chains. In this example, Ethereum and Solana. Let's say they have 3 signatories. Let's say they have 10 signatories. It doesn't really matter how many signatories they have. It's not decentralized. They have signing rights over 100% of your capital. And they control all of that capital. They can steal it, or more generously, when they get hacked, the losses to the contract are unlimited. There's no insurance mechanism. There's no speed limit, which is bandwidth in our example. And there's no insurance, which is the bandwidth collateral in the layer cake system. And so let's come on to the second major risk that layer cake deals with. This is chain reorganization. This is operating safely across different zones of blockchain sovereignty. And what we mean by sovereignty is essentially the consensus protocol of each chain has its own rules, and therefore each chain that is connected to another chain is essentially receiving the output of those consensus rules on the other chain. So, as I've just said, Let's say take Ethereum and Solana. Let's say you bridge to Solana. You bridge some Ethereum to Solana. Solana is now relying on Ethereum's consensus, because if something goes wrong with Ethereum's consensus, Solana is exposed to that risk, and its DeFi ecosystem is exposed to that risk. And this is really where the idea of a reorganization attack comes in. So under a reorganization attack, a user, or in fact an attacker, would deposit a large amount of Ethereum in the Ethereum bridge smart contract. They would receive Solana Ethereum, so the wrapped Ethereum, on Solana, and they would immediately sell that for cash, let's say USDT or USDC. They would then buy up hashing power in order to subvert Ethereum's consensus and bring the Ethereum chain back to the state prior to the initial Ethereum deposit. So they end up with their Ethereum back, their large amount is ETH back, and the dollars they sold it for. The problem is the bridge contract is now deficient in ETH collateral relative to the amount of minted wrapped ETH. And this means that the wrapped ETH, the SETH on Solana, will unpeg from the value of ETH because it's no longer one-to-one backed. And this has major downstream effects on the DeFi ecosystem, on the chain that is reliant on the consensus of the other chain. In this case, Solana being reliant on the consensus of Ethereum. This is something we want to avoid. So we avoid this, again, through the insurance mechanism. Bandwidth providers are not only providing those 500 ETH in order to speed up the time of transfer, they're providing additional collateral in terms of reorganization, protection collateral. And that collateral has held for a number of hours. Sometimes maybe for some chains, maybe 6 hours, for other chains, maybe 12 hours. And as time goes on, the risk of a reorganization at a particular block diminishes. So Flare is holding both the collateral, which enables the bridge to be fast, but also collateral, which enables the bridge to be reorganization resistant. And so this means that the bridge is resistant both to bandwidth providers becoming malicious and against a chain reorganization attack. We think this is the most robust way to do bridging. And so the risk of chain reorganization due specifically to layer cake can be reduced if the bandwidth that is provided is below the threshold at which it's desirable to attack a chain. So it's very expensive to attack a chain. You know, you would have to have many, many hundreds of millions, if not many, many billions at risk in the bridge in order for it to be worth acquiring sufficient hashing power to attack the chain. So in practice, it is very expensive, and therefore the bandwidth provision can be very, very large, which means that we can be safe even with very, very high bandwidth. But for providing the collateral against these risks, the bandwidth providers earn a small fee for each bridging event. And at 10 basis points, so 0.1%, we've modeled it, and it's in the layer cake paper on our website at the end. We think bandwidth providers will earn about 37% per year under the assumption that the bridge is being utilized at full utilization. So to our knowledge, layer cake provides the most decentralized and lowest risk way of moving value between chains, whilst remaining economically competitive, both for users and bandwidth providers. So this brings us probably to one of the most important parts of what we're building, and that's building linearly rather than quadratically. And I'll come to what this means. So if you want to build bilateral bridges, to connect two chains, you need one bridge. To connect 3 chains, you need 3 bridges. To connect 6 chains, to connect 4 chains, you need 6 bridges. And so as you can see, those numbers are going up, and they're not going up linearly. So they actually go up in a quadratic form. And so in order to connect the top 100 smart contract chains with bilateral bridging, this is bridges between each chain connecting to every other chain. So not routing through something, just one bridge between every chain in that set of 100 chains. You would need 4,950 bridges. And that actually is an impossible task for any team really to build. And so we don't need that with layer cake. With layer cake, we can scale linearly. But the other thing is that we can create the same token on each chain. And what I mean by that is if you look at the bilateral case, if you have Ethereum on Ethereum and you move it to Solana, you get S ETH, Solana ETH. And now if you move that to Cosmos, you get CS ETH, Cosmos Solana ETH. But if you bridge from Ethereum directly to Cosmos, you just get C ETH. And Cosmos Solana ETH does not equal Cosmos ETH. And most DeFi applications on Cosmos won't necessarily take Cosmos Solana ETH. So therefore, your Cosmos Solana ETH may be less useful to you and therefore less valuable. And so it may not be worth 1 ETH. And you may need to swap it for Cosmos ETH in order to use it on a DeFi application. And so this is what we mean by fragmenting liquidity. You can imagine this as 3 chains. Imagine what it looks like when you have 100 chains and millions of routings between those chains. Absolutely impossible, really, because all the liquidity is fragmented. So what layer cake can do, which is rather nice, is that even without routing the token through Flare, but just because Flare is securing layer cake, we can create the bridges for the top 100 chains to allow tokens to flow from any of those chains to any other of those chains, not with 4,950 bridges, but with just 101 smart contracts. And that makes our job of building this system out much easier. And then secondly, and the most important thing, is a token issued on Cosmos, let's call that a wrapped ETH on Cosmos, coming from Polkadot, Solana, or Ethereum, or Flare, is all identical because there's one smart contract. It issues one standard token, and it's all secured by Flare. It doesn't necessarily have to flow through Flare, but it's secured by Flare, and the smart contract issues just one representation of wrapped ETH coming from any other connected chain. And that means that rather than fragmenting liquidity, we're unifying it. And that's really very valuable. And so in a world of proliferating chains, parachains, subnets, sidenets, and supernets, Flare can connect everything. And we're really excited about this system. So on to the roadmap. Just a little recap of the roadmap. First, I'll deal with Songbird. So obviously, as most of you know on this, we launched Songbird back in September. We've launched the FTSO. It has close to 100 data providers. Pleased to say that about 60 to 70% of the available tokens are delegated to those data providers. And recently we launched the State Connector. So the State Connector now exists on Songbird, and it's been activated. Next, we'll be moving to activate the consensus mechanism, which puts the FTSOs in the driving seat of the network. Then we'll be releasing the State Connector client release. What this means is that the testers in the State Connector can now start working on that State Connector and start proving data onto the network. And then the F assets have recently entered testing, and they're entering audit in the next couple of weeks. And we don't expect any issues with that audit. And we will look to launch that as soon as they're out of audit. So that will be the F asset A system. This is the system where 100% of the underlying is locked on the underlying network through the use of slashing if that agent moves any of the underlying. Then we aim to be launching Layer Cake as soon as possible, the first batch of bridges. We think that will include Ethereum and Terra, and we're thinking about what other bridges to build and in what order. The Ethereum and Terra would be great, both bridging to Flare and between them. And then after that on Songbird, we'll be launching the F-Asset B system, which allows the agent to have a variable amount of the underlying in their address on the underlying network. And then, as I mentioned, we want to upgrade the FTSO to be able to have thousands of price series and thousands of data providers. So that's the roadmap for Songbird. And really importantly, as I've mentioned before, I believe in our blog, we are working on a governance proposal such that the Flare governance system becomes bicameral, meaning that Songbird is the lower house to Flare's upper house. If you think about the House and the Senate in the US, in order for there to be a governance proposal, we think that the governance proposal that we're putting in to make this happen is the idea that you'll have to bond or stake Songbird against the governance proposal in return for potentially some bounty in order to incentivize people to stake their Songbird, return for some bounty for the winning proposal. So once it's won on Songbird, it then goes to Flare for a vote to ratify it. And if that becomes successful, then the Songbird, the people who staked on Songbird, can potentially get some bounty. So then here's the roadmap for Flare. As we said, we can launch, we're now at the point where we can launch Flare. We've got the network, we've got the FTSO, we've got the stake connector. We've built everything that we need to build, and we will be going into an audit with Trail of Bits in mid-May, and that lasts until about mid-June. We don't expect any issues to be found, but it is a very, very large code base, and I don't want to say that there won't be issues, but we really, really don't expect any major issues. And we will be extremely public with the community if there are, provided that it doesn't cause a risk to Songbird. In the process of being public about it, we would amend the issue on Songbird and then become public about it, just so that there aren't any losses of value. But if everything goes well, we really are trying to launch Flare on the 4th of July. And then, as I've mentioned previously, we think there's a better way to distribute the token that achieves some of our core objectives. Both objectives for the community, making it lower risk for the community, making it better rewarding to take part in the protocols, and generally making the network better and stronger and giving it a longer time for the ecosystem to come to fruition, such that we're more successful together. So, as you know, in the distribution proposal, it's 15% of the tokens being distributed on day one. And those are distributed obviously to people that claimed them through, through their ledger devices, through self-custody, but the bulk of them are going to exchanges. And so we don't want to hold that governance vote until we are aware that at least 75% of the tokens are not with exchanges, but with the people that they're meant to go to. So we'll be watching exchanges to make sure they've distributed them. And then once 75% of the tokens have been distributed, that initial 15%, we will have a governance vote on the token distribution. And I'll be releasing the token distribution memo as soon as I get around to polishing it off, which will be soon. And then on Flare, we'll have the network, we'll have the FTSO, we'll have the stake connector, and then there's certain things you can do with that, which I'll go over in a minute. Then really the next major point is the F-Asset A launch, which is the F-Assets where 100% of the underlying are kept on the chain, on the origination chain. And that's also the self-minting option. Then we'll be launching a Songbird bridge such that tokens can move from Songbird onto Flare and from Flare onto Songbird. And then we really look forward to launching the first set of layer cake bridges. And the rest I've already commented on. So I just want to briefly cover what you can do at each stage after mainnet launch. So when we launch the mainnet, the FTSO and state connector will be live, and you'll be able to do governance using your token, including, as I mentioned, SGB for governance. You'll be able to delegate to the FTSO. Now, really importantly, applications will be able to be built using the FTSO. And applications will be able to build using events from the state connector. And this is really the most exciting thing. This is our Web 2 to Web 3. This is our blockchain to blockchain. Anyone from launch can build an application that takes in information from another blockchain or another system and does something interesting with a smart contract. So when we launch the F assets, you'll be able to mint and use on Flare FBTC, FXRP, FAlgo, FDoge, FLTC, FXLM, and I think I said FFilecoin. And the uses of that will be DeFi, crowdfunding, which I'll come on to in a second, and payments. And again, I'll make the point. You'll be able to use Bitcoin for payments cheaply and quickly. And that's really quite fun. And you'll be able to deploy your Flare as an agent into the F asset system to earn in the F asset you're securing. So you'll be able to earn Bitcoin if you're securing F Bitcoin. You'll be able to earn XRP if you're securing FXRP. And remember, you can earn that whilst delegating. So there's no optionality between delegating and earning the F asset return as an agent. And that's really important. And so I just want to show the crowdfunding concept. It's something that's been extremely valuable on Cardano for bootstrapping the ecosystem and getting projects building on the ecosystem, and something we want to also implement on Flare. Now on Cardano, they can only do it with the Cardano asset, ADA. On Flare, we can do it with all of the F assets, with Flare itself, and with assets coming through Layer Cake onto Flare. And I'll explain why we can do that in a second. But the general idea of what Cardano calls ISPOs, initial staking product offerings, I think. I could be wrong on the P. But is that you take your asset, whether it's FBTC, FXRP, FLR, or Ethereum perhaps, and you stake it into a crowdfunding contract. That your capital is protected. The contract never takes your capital out of the contract. But the yield that those assets earn is passed to a project. You've chosen that project through choosing that crowdfunding contract. So the yield is passed to the project, and the project gives you something in return, perhaps project tokens, perhaps even the product in the real world, perhaps an NFT, who knows? The idea is that you stake your capital with no loss of your capital, and your yield is passed over to fund the Flare ecosystem and the projects on it. And the reason we can do this is because the foundation set aside 20 billion tokens in order to create an incentive pool for creating F assets and Layer Cake assets. And then additionally, Flare earns the delegation reward. And so all of those earnings, whether the Flare delegation reward or the F asset minting reward or the Layer Cake reward, all of that yield can be used to fund projects building on Flare. And we think that this is a really nice, low risk way to put your capital to work. And so let's just look at what we can do once we've got Layer Cake. And the crowdfunding slide assumed Layer Cake in terms of ADA and Ethereum and USDT. Once Layer Cake exists, you can bridge between any connected chain. So from Flare to Ethereum, from Ethereum to Solana, Solana to Cosmos. You can do it with insurance, speed, and decentralization. You can use assets from connected chains on Flare. And most importantly, you can build dApps on Flare that can use any of the tokens from any of the connected chains with information from each connected chain and/or from information from any connected system. And that's why we say, deploy once, serve many. Thank you.
Wow, Hugo, that was absolutely awesome. There's quite a lot to unpack there, so we'll be doing plenty of follow-ups with the community.
There is indeed.
To delve into that much deeper. We've also got the Q&A to look forward to, where we can also explore some of the themes that came out there. Thank you, Hugo. Right, I'm delighted to hand over to our smart contract lead, Ilan, who's going to give us a high-level overview on the FTSO that launched on our Canary network, Songbird, last September. Thanks, Ilan.
Hi again, everyone. Thank you. Thanks, Hugo, for the presentation. I'll do a short overview of the FTSO. Let's start by what is the problem we are trying to solve. The Oracle problem is a problem that is apparent in blockchains since inception, I think. And there were many solutions tried to solve this problem. It is very hard to determine the price of any given asset between all fragmented markets. And as I said, many solutions exist. Most of them are either centralized or prone to manipulation or attacks. What we are doing with the FTSO, we have an open and decentralized system. We enable any price provider to join and feed prices. We're leveraging the proof of stake, so any token holder can delegate his tokens to a price provider and participate in this game. And later, as Hugo already mentioned, the best prices are being rewarded. Currently, we have up to 100 providers. Later, we plan to have much more. So more details will follow. So here's the high-level description of the system. The FTSO actually is a set of contracts. Each price pair has one contract, which is deployed on Songbird at the moment. Multiple price providers, external providers, try to get price feeds from as many data sources as they can, and they feed prices to the contracts every 3 minutes. This is done in a commit and reveal scheme, so no one can copy prices from another provider. Per price epoch, which is 3 minutes, all the prices are calculated and a weighted median is found, and this weighted median is actually the price. Now we truncate the upper and lower quartile, and then all the best prices in the middle get rewarded. With this system, any user can participate. So any Songbird holder can wrap his tokens and delegate his vote power, meaning balance, to any price provider. Now, the tokens are never locked. We built it in a way that enables us to take snapshots of the vote power and not lock tokens. And so actually, even though it's staking, no one has to lock tokens. So it's like a great place where from the beginning, once you hold the tokens, you can already participate in the system. You can already delegate your vote power, meaning your balance, and earn rewards for doing so. This is the high-level idea. Some technical details. So we have a 7-day reward epoch. So every week, anyone can claim his rewards, wrap the claim tokens, and redelegate them. Per reward epoch, any token holder can choose a new price provider and redelegate. So if the price provider is not being honest or something happens with him, he can choose a better price provider. The price providers are capped with vote powers, so no single price provider can have too much weight in the system. And each day, around 12 million Songbird tokens are distributed in rewards. Some goes to token holders, and a bit fee is going to the price provider. Currently, as I said, we have 100 competing data providers, and we also have 3 trusted providers, which are fail-safe mechanism for this price feed if anything goes wrong, but so far, this haven't yet happened. Now I'll hand over to Alan Alan and his team built an amazing monitor that can enable monitoring the activity in the price in the FTSOs and all the price provider activity. And he can show us some analytics, very interesting analytics about the price providers. So thank you very much.
Hi again. As Ilan said, I'll show you some things about how FTO system evolved, some tools that we and community use, and of course some insights. Let me say something about FTSO system evolution. The system started with Songbird network deployment. Now we are already in the week 31, which corresponds to reward epoch 31. And at the moment, almost all data providers are submitting. While the system was evolving, data providers were joining gradually. What we do constant monitoring and checking for possible attacks, exploits, anomalies, collusions. That's why we developed some specialized tools for ourselves, and we also share these tools with the community. Data providers are really great community, very cooperative, and we have a great channel on Telegram. There is a strong competition between them. Is thinning the reward price range, as we'll see. The prices that we get out of the system are very stable, and this is quite impressive, you'll see. You know that the best providers are very heavily invested. They actually employ specialized team because it's really hard competition, a lot of work on data analytics and optimizations. Let me mention one important tool by community, Flare Metrics. This analytics tool is primarily focused to people who delegate, so delegators. I would say that the most important metrics here is reward rate, which is basically a yield. Yeah. On the other hand, we have a tool called FTSO Monitor, which is not public at the moment. It's internal tool, but it's also shared with the community of data providers. And the tool is used for comparing performance and detecting anomalies and all these things related to monitoring. One insight, as I already mentioned, is that almost all data providers are submitting prices. This is a chart of, it's not quite last, it's 2 days. And we can see that we have numbers around 100. We are very satisfied with the quality of prices. Here you can see one of very liquid exchanges on Ethereum. This is the yellow line, and the blue line with dots is actually the prices we get out of FTSO system. And it's similar with other feeds, Bitcoin, Litecoin, and so on. One interesting thing is what was happening with the rewarded price range. So rewarded range, you can see it barely in this image, like some gray area around the blue FTSO prices. To get a reward, you have to be in this rewarded price range, and in this range there is 50% of vote power weight. So this range is quite thin. This is one observation, and the other one is that if we compare the prices that we get here on the chart with exchange prices, they match pretty well with the situation about 20 to 30 seconds before the submission. For data providers, it is important to see how good they are. On the left image, we have a kind of normalized view where price from the FTSO is on 1, and the gray area is rewarded price range. And you can see that we are dealing here with, so the next tick is 0.001. It's kind of 0.01%. Yeah. And here the metrics is, the most important metrics for data providers is called success rate. And it's basically counting the occurrences where we are within the reward range or outside. Yeah? And here it's, for instance, an image and a summary for one of the top data providers. If we just look what are the current success rates, like top 5 data providers, they have 70% plus success rate. Top 50 providers have 20% plus, and top 75 providers, they have 15% plus. Here is an interesting image where we can see top 20 data providers in a range of 1 hour. And you can see how hard competition is here. And the right image is a part zoomed in. And you can see from the numbers that the data providers are competing on the 5th decimal digits. So very exact or very competitive range. One important view on the network is also what is happening during the week. Here we see traffic in terms of transactions per second and gas used and blocks produced for 1 week. And that spike, it's the end or the beginning of the next reward epoch. We can see that delegators are intensively claiming the rewards after the end of the reward epoch. Like the traffic almost doubles for about 8-9 hours. Each dot is average of 1 hour. And this is mainly due to claiming rewards and using it into DeFi systems like Flare Finance. As a summary, we can say we are very satisfied with prices, security, and performance in general of the system. Competition has caused prices to get locked in a thin interval, which is very hard to move. So the prices are quite stable. You need like 50% of vote power to move this range. Community was very helpful. It's really nice community, I have to say. And one important thing they're helping in is detecting possible colluders. And we are planning to add additional mechanism, as Hugo said, like preventing price drift and collusion prevention mechanism. So let me hand it now to Hugo. No, Hugo, Xavi.
So, thanks, Alan. I'm Xavi, the head of technical documentation, and I will be showing you the details and a live demo of the state connector. So let's start with the basics. What is the state connector? It is a smart contract running on the Flare blockchain that can retrieve information from outside the Flare blockchain. So it basically works like an on-demand oracle. As you can see, any user on the chain and outside the chain can request things to the state connector, and they will get replies from the state connector. And what the state connector does is goes outside, goes into the world, fetches the information, and sends it back to the requester. It only answers to yes/no questions which are objectively verifiable. That means that it can't answer any kind of question. It has to be objectively verifiable. And also it does it very quickly. That means that it has a level of scalability that's comparable to Web 2. It's nothing like what we are used to see on Web 3. Why is this interesting? Because if we are able to retrieve the state of other blockchains, we can do things like checking whether or not a transaction happened on another chain. And if we are able to do that, we've got a critical building block for things like the F assets and the layer cake bridge that we have just described. So it's a very important piece of the Flare ecosystem. And how does it work? How can a smart contract get information from off-chain? Well, it does it by using the attestation providers. The general scheme is that requests go into the state connector and they are forwarded to the attestation providers. Attestation providers are independent entities. They are pieces of software running outside the Flare blockchain. They are not managed by Flare in any way. They are just computer programs running on somebody else's computer that receive the requests, go into the world, fetch the information, submit the information back to the state connector, so it gets back into the blockchain, and then they get rewarded for this, obviously. And then the state connector runs a consensus algorithm. So all the answers, independent answers that it gets from all the attestation providers, it runs a consensus algorithm, and if more than 50% of the answers agree, that's the agreed upon answer, and it's made public so that whoever requested that can get the answer. And we are going to show all this using a live demo. Now, the live demo has a pause of about 5 minutes in the middle because there's consensus involved. The attestation providers need to go into the world, fetch information, and bring it back, and then they need to be evaluated. So during this 5 minutes pause during the demo, I will be giving you the exact details of how this works. So the demo, we will be making a transfer into the Algorand network. We could have used the Bitcoin network also. We've got that already implemented, but then the demo would have taken a bit longer. So we use the Algorand network. And once the transfer is done, we will request the state connector whether that transfer has happened or not on a different blockchain. So let's start the demo. So I pass the baton to Luca.
Yeah, hello. Thank you, Xavi. Hello, everybody. I'm Luca from a smart contract team. And today I'll be doing the state connector proof of concept. In reality, most of the work and filling out the forms and querying the data from the underlying explorers this is all gonna be automated by the third-party applications that are gonna be actually using the state connector protocol as part of their infrastructure. And as Xavi mentioned today, I will be using one of the supported attestation types called payment transaction. We already have that implemented for 5 different underlying chains. So Bitcoin, Litecoin, Dogecoin, XRP, and Algo. And for today's presentations, I will be using Algorand's blockchain to transfer some of their native Algo tokens. Okay, so let's begin. First off, I'll go to my Algorand wallet. I'll make a transaction on Algorand's blockchain. For instance, I'll send 2 Algo tokens back to myself. So I'll put receiving address as my address. I'll put in some node to my transaction. This node can later be used by the state connector system and everybody using it. And note that this payment transaction starts with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and so on. And we will later be able to see this. So yeah, I'll create a transaction, sign it, and send it to the world. And now let's go back to the state connector system and see how dApps using the state connector as part of their infrastructure actually validate this data. So on your screen, you can see 7 different attestation types. We can add more of them by governance system. We already implemented 4 of them. That's payment transaction, balance decreasing transaction, block height confirmation, and referenced payment non-existence. These are the attestations that are going to be used by the F-asset system. And we also added 3 more examples to show off state connectors' versatility and scalability to bring data from Web 2 to Web 3 and from other Web 3 platforms to Flare. So we can bring results of a chess match to the state connector system, or prices of different stocks to the state connector system, or even validate some NFT transfers that happened on other chains. For the demo that we're doing, the third-party application would request a payment verification, and for the source, we would have to specify Algorand. And now we need to get some data from the Algorand's blockchain. For that, I'll go back to my wallet. I see my transaction that I created earlier, and I go to view it in Explorer. In order to prove this payment transaction, I have to provide transaction ID, and also the hash of a block that's at least 3 blocks newer than the block that my transaction was a part of. So, for instance, I'll take this block that happened 5 blocks after my block. Put its hash here, and go back, copy the transaction ID, and put it here. And now the dApp would create a request to the state connector system. User would have to sign this request, and now this request was sent to the state connector system, and now we have to wait for it to be validated by attestation providers. And this is now in state connector's request commit reveal phase, and Xavi will explain this in more detail.
Okay, thanks.
Back to Xavi.
So if we can see my presentation, thanks. So what did we just see? We made a request to the state connector that was filling that form with the transaction hash and the block height at which the transaction happened. And that information was sent to the state connector through a request. It's a normal transaction, so it had to be signed with MetaMask, as you've seen. What's happening now? This request is being forwarded to all the attestation providers in the network. This is using EVM events, so it's very lightweight and easily scalable. The attestation providers right now are going into the world and fetching the requested data and submitting the data back to the state connector. Now, let me use this time to explain a bit how this is done. Data is collected in rounds. So every time a user makes a request, the attestation providers do not jump on it and start fetching the information. Instead, during a 90 seconds round, requests are gathered, and once the round is finished, the information is fetched, and all the requests made during the round are answered at once. And that's done by building a Merkle tree. As some of you may already know, a Merkle tree is made up of the hashes of hashes. We are actually hashing the request and the answer to that request, and building a tree that compresses all these answers into a single Merkle tree root. That is a single hash that summarizes all the information that we are answering. Once an attestation provider has collected all the answers for that round, it builds the Merkle tree and submits the Merkle root, only the root. That makes this system extremely scalable, because that means that we can answer lots and lots of questions of requests, and we only need to transmit a single Merkle root every time. Once the state connector has all the answers from all the attestation providers, meaning all the Merkle roots, it just counts how many different roots it received. And if more than 50% of the roots are the same, that's considered the agreed upon result, and it's made public. If there's no agreement, if there's not more than half of the attestation providers providing the same result, then that result is not made public. So no result is given. That round is considered void or null. So if you made a request and you don't get an answer for that round, you have to make the request again. At this point, maybe the demo has already the results.
We need 60 more seconds.
Okay, I can keep talking then. I wanted to talk about a couple more details. I wanted to talk about this a bit later, but let's do it now. Further optimization is that all the requests are made in 3 phases called request, commit, and reveal, and that's why this is called the RCR protocol. All the user requests are received during the request phase. The attestation providers submit their results during the commit phase, but these results are obfuscated. They are hashed by an unknown key so that the different attestation providers cannot pick at each other's submissions and cheat. They cannot copy the results of some other people and get rewarded by not doing any job at all. So during the commit phase, the results are sent obfuscated. And then during the third phase, the reveal phase, attestation providers provide state connector can actually see the results and run the state connector. And this is to avoid cheating. And the performance gain comes from the fact that these 3 phases are actually overlapped. So you make a request, and while the attestation providers are committing their results for that request, you can start making a second request. And while the reveal phase for the first request comes in and the commit phase for the second request comes in, you can start a third request. So with this simple overlapping, you get a 3-fold performance gain. Do we have results now?
Yeah, yep, we do. Okay, so we saw Adapt make a request to the attestation provider, and then, as Xavi mentioned, attestation providers had to query this data. They had to go to Algorand's blockchain, get the information about this data, process it, make Merkle trees, submit them to the state connector system. State connector system had to validate them and come to the consensus, and the result of this, all of this process can be seen on the screen. So we can see some metadata about the request that we made. So we made a payment request to approve a payment transaction on Algorand blockchain. We can see here in a request the data requested, and in response, some of the data that the attestation provider got from the underlying blockchain. We can see, for instance, that source address and receiving address are the same. That's because I've sent algo tokens from myself to myself. We can see that spent amount is some number. This is actually in micro algos, and that received amount is a little bit more. And we can see the payment reference. This is the thing that I inputted into the Algorand wallet as a node, and we can see that it starts with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, just like the string that I've put into the node. And this can be used by, let's say, F-Asset system as a payment reference, or other systems can also use these references. And together with this request and response raw data that you can see on the screen and Merkle proof that we can see on the bottom, any smart contract using the state connector can actually validate that this data was accepted by the state connector consensus protocol, and this is indicated here by these green asterisks on the screen. And we can also see that the full Merkle tree that Xavi was talking about. So if we click here, we can see that for this round, this was the Merkle hash accepted by the state connector. It had 11 leaves, and we can see that we've proven some transactions. So Algorand networks also send transactions on Bitcoin, transactions on Bitcoin network, and so on. So that's all from my side. Xavi, take it away.
Yeah, so let me summarize what did we just see. We made a transaction on the Algorand network, and then we went on the Flare network, which is totally different. We requested if that transaction did or did not happen. The state connector requested that from the attestation providers. They went, gathered information, came back, and the state connector told us that, yeah, that transaction had happened. And this has been done in a way that's decentralized. We haven't used any Flare infrastructure. The attestation providers are not under our control, and it's scalable. Now, a couple more details. I already talked about the RCR protocol. The last interesting bit is the branching protocol, which adds an additional layer of security to this. So all the validators on the Flare network use the same set of attestation providers. So all the copies of the state connector smart contract running on the Flare network, you send the queries to the same attestation providers. As a validator, as the owner, or as the operator of a Flare validator, you have the option to add local attestation providers to your list. So if you've got an attestation provider that you trust, maybe because you run it yourself, you can add it to the list of attestation providers, and it will become a local attestation providers. Now, the state connector smart contract is made in such a way that if the local attestation providers disagree with the default set, they take no action. So when the state connector collects all the answers, if there's a disagreement with the local attestation providers, they will not give any answer. Obviously, this will naturally produce a fork in the network, and your validator will halt. It will be stopped and will take no action. And this adds a second consensus round into the state connector. So first, the state connector analyzes all the attestation providers, local or not local, and runs a consensus on that. But on top of that, you can have local attestation providers that will cause a consensus fork if the network, if your validator uses a local attestation provider that disagrees with the default set. Then you can recover from that by finding out if it was your node that was if it was the local attestation provider that was wrong, or if it was the default set that was wrong, which could happen, even though that means that 50% of the default set of attestation providers are wrong, and that requires a 51% attack on the attestation providers, which should be a rare occasion. But even in such cases, if you use a local attestation provider and you trust it, your node will be safe because it will take no action until this situation is resolved. So no matter if your attestation provider was wrong or the default set was wrong, you can be sure that your validator node won't take any action unless there's full agreement between all the involved parties. And if you are running a DApp and you are relying on your own validator node using attestation providers that you trust, this adds a lot of added security. So to summarize, what are the main takeaways from the state connector? It brings external information into the network using a doubly secured consensus. It is a basic building block for far more powerful interoperability tools like the EV assets and the layer cake. Very importantly, you don't need to build using the state connector to use it. It's just a regular public smart contract. You just need to call it and use it. And also, very importantly, it creates Web3 attestation, but uses Web2 level scalability. So we are very proud of this, and we think this is extremely important and will become very, very important in the scene. That's all from my side. Thanks. You can take it from here, Max.
Thank you, Chavi.
Thank you so much.
Great. I believe we're going to get on to the chat bit. So I'd like to introduce Jihan Chu from Kinetic Capital and John Fiorelli from Block Demon. Obviously, you know Max Walter.
Hey guys, nice to have you on.
Hey guys. Hey guys, good to be here.
1 second. Great. So thanks so much for being here. I know you guys are at, I think you're both in the Bahamas, from what I remember. So thanks for taking the time. I think, we've presented essentially what we've been working on for a long time, pretty much in its entirety now. And that's the first time. So whilst it probably came across like a PhD lecture, it is a very important thing for us to do to reframe and restate exactly what we're trying to build, because it needs to be clear that we're not just bridging a few blockchains. We're trying to bridge both blockchains and the internet to Web3. So I'd love you guys to ask me any questions that you have. Max, Walter, our lead decentralized systems engineers here as well.
Great. Thanks for that. It's an incredible amount of information, almost overwhelming, I think, maybe to some. And so maybe my first question is to that point, how do you simplify this? I think in the world of kind of crypto, having viral messages, having kind of packaged, digestible types of information for people who are enthusiasts or who are supporting the project, but also need to be able to explain it to others. What are the kind of key points that you would give them? What are the kind of key nuggets that you think that the average person who is in the Flare community should be able to communicate to their community?
So the simplification is really in the products. And at its base, Flare is an L1 that can use data, and any of that data can be probabilistic data, so price data, or it can be data from another chain or another system. So it's quite simple. It's a blockchain with these native ways to use data, and that unlocks a ton of things. And then we have two systems, the F assets, which is bridging for non-smart contract tokens, and then Layer Cake, which is bridging for smart contract tokens. The important thing to understand about Layer Cake is that it's fast, it's fully insured, and it's decentralized. And that's it. So we have these four things really: the FTSO, the state connector, F assets, and Layer Cake. And that's kind of what we're going out the gate with.
Sorry to interrupt. Is there something that kind of wraps that all together? I mean, I've seen some questions before about, who are your nearest competitors? And maybe I would modify that to say, who are your nearest analogous chains or projects that would make it easier for people to kind of reference, like, oh, Flare is like this or has aspects of this?
So really our nearest competitors are bridges like Wormhole and other things like that, but we also provide a native EVM chain for those tokens to work on really nicely. The way we handle bridging is extremely different to anyone else, and that's really what we find to be the great use case of Flare.
So building better bridges.
Building better bridges, and then doing really interesting thing with the assets you bridge. So like I said, being able to deploy an app on Flare that can serve essentially every token in the space, because you can bring every token through Flare's bridges to that app. To me, that's an incredibly powerful thing.
Got it. Cool. Thanks.
To do that, I mean, just speaking on behalf of Block Demon, we run an FTSO right now on Songbird, and we expect that as you add more assets to be bridged, that's a lot of price pairs. How do you see FTSO scaling as those pairs, increase quadratically? How do you envision the scaling of FTSO? So
the first nice thing is that Layer Cake, which is where you'll get the scaling in terms of needing those prices specifically for the system, that doesn't need those prices. So Layer Cake doesn't rely on the FTSO whatsoever, which is quite nice. But more importantly, we do actually want to be able to scale those prices. We really want to be able to scale the prices and the number of data providers. And I think the best person, to help me answer that question is Max Walter, with whom, we've been discussing this for many months now.
Yeah, so what's important to know is that right now, most of that system and the logic paths are built in Solidity on the EVM layer, which is known not to be the fastest and the most performant environment to run code, especially cryptographic code, efficiently. And we have plans to move those paths that need the most performance, so that an EVM relates a lot to everything that is storage, for example, and move that direct into Go. So there's a variety of ways you can do that. You can either call into the EVM directly, or you can use precompiled contracts. Currently, we're looking at first moving the most performance critical parts into precompiled contracts. That should speed up the FTSO by several orders of magnitude already, so we can expand it to several thousand providers. In terms of pairs, there's only so many chains that are really relevant in the end. So I think there's like a pretty strict cap on how far we have to go there. So the focus is really going to be on getting as many providers on board as possible, so that we can be as decentralized as possible with that system. Once we have, the low-hanging fruit out of the way, we can actually move almost the entire system into Go long-term to gain even more performance if needed. But that's a much bigger undertaking, so that would be further in the future.
That's great. Thanks. I actually, as an additional question, and this relates to Layer Cake. I think you ran through some examples of how Layer Cake provides bandwidth. And if I understand it correctly, it provides essentially a form of insurance for bridging provided by bandwidth providers who are essentially insurance providers, right? I was wondering if you could help us understand, as we're considering participating as a bandwidth provider, what's the criteria for the best kind of bandwidth providers, and how should we be thinking about it in terms of responsibility versus benefits as participants?
So bandwidth providers do need to run some form of infrastructure because they are operating the bridge. And so they probably need to be relatively, well, they don't have to be that sophisticated on the technical side, but they need to run infrastructure. So it's non-trivial. And so the most important thing really in the system is that there is this insurance, and that the insurance never exceeds the amount that would precipitate someone to attack a chain. So we never want the bandwidth to go above a certain level. And it's very unlikely it would. You would have to have probably billions of bandwidth locked in the network in order, tens of billions perhaps, in order to incentivize an attack on a chain. And then really, bandwidth providers are pretty passive, other than just signing the transactions across the chain. If they do it poorly, they'll have their bandwidth collateral taken. If they do it well, they'll earn a really comfortable yield.
There was one question that came up in one of the chats. Maybe I can kind of relay it here. The question is, what does Flare and Layer Cake in particular mean for NFTs on the network?
So Layer Cake is, initially designed for fungible assets. So regular tokens like ETH and USDT and all those kind of things. UST, especially from Terra, which is something we would certainly want to see. But there is a possibility to arrange a Layer Cake version for NFTs. The complexity of that is that the collateral that's locked as insurance would have to be monetary collateral, because it would be very hard. You can't lock the NFT that's locked on Ethereum on Flare also. And so you'd have to have like some ETH against that NFT. And that would mean that if you want to bridge an NFT to another chain, you would have to specify what you want your insurance to be, whether you want your insurance to be £10, £10,000, or £10 million. That's pretty much like the existing insurance market, right? You can insure your painting for whatever you want. And so we can create a version of Layer Cake that allows a user to essentially buy bandwidth.
I would like to add to that as well, because I'm really excited about the possibilities of what we're building. The state connector is essentially agnostic of whatever the application is that uses it, right? So if somebody, anyone out there wants to build bridging for NFTs, they can just do it. Like they don't need us to do it for them. And we've already seen a lot of NFT use in the DeFi community on Ethereum, where they use NFTs to collateralize them. And so this problem that NFTs need to be assigned a certain value in order to be used in DeFi, it's already being solved, right? And the same thing can just be transferred to a model that bridges NFTs. So from a technical perspective, there's really nothing standing in the way of creating a bridge of any kind for NFTs using the state connector. And I think it's really interesting because state connector and FTSO are really more like low-level primitives that can be used to build applications on top of it, while the F assets and the layer cake are just two such applications that we think will be very useful to the community. But there's an endless amount of possibilities of connecting systems in different ways.
That's
I think
really good
what I
segue
love about
into-
that is, oh, sorry, go ahead, John.
Oh, sorry. I think that's a great segue into two other questions that have come up from a few other community members. One is with F assets. I think that there was a mention that BTC or FBTC would be one of the first assets to be, mintable. And one question came up, which was, is this type of thing something that would or should be subject to governance proposal, or is it essentially permissionless to instantiate that? So just talking about F assets, could you talk a little bit about how, which assets are being implemented or instantiated on Flare, and what is the process for that?
So we are, we're allowing Bitcoin, Litecoin, XRP, Stellar, Doge, Algorand, and Filecoin to be minted. And that really is the bulk of the potential F assets. So there really isn't anything, there are not too many coins outside of that are, unnecessarily large. But it's not very difficult to create an F asset once the F asset contract has been published. You would just need the state connector to support that chain, and that would be a governance proposal, again, starting from Songbird and moving to Flare in the sort of bicameral governance system that I mentioned earlier. So starting from Songbird and moving to Flare, you would do a governance proposal, and then the FTSO would have to support it. So it's likely that you would just do a governance proposal to say, we'd like to include this particular asset, and that the community would vote on it. Obviously, we want to make sure that the largest assets are covered, and something like Layer Cake, is going to at least have the right from the outset to cover at least the top 50 assets. And then other assets can be added through governance.
Would Layer Cake be subject to the same kind of mechanisms for adding, say, new bridges, or is that a more
Absolutely, absolutely, it would. But we want to make sure that we have the right to do the top 50 chains or so.
Sure.
And then anything below that, we can move to governance, so that if there's a strong desire for a particular chain, that's great, and we welcome that. But in the interest of the network, we want to make sure that we can do the biggest chains first.
Right, in terms of the smart contract development for the bridges.
Yeah. So once the smart contract's built, it's not excessively hard to deploy to new networks.
Right.
It's just changing a few parameters and adding them to the state connector.
And participating as a bandwidth provider is permissionless, right?
Absolutely. That's the whole point of the system. Thank you. And this really what Max mentioned about building NFT bridges is kind of like the key. Flare's building a few products, the F assets and Layer Cake. But actually, if you look at Flare standing back, it's just this network that can come to consensus over the state of other blockchains. And so, and again, I think insurance is probably one of the biggest applications of that. And you can almost picture Flare as insurance protocol for blockchain. It's just that insurance is being used to enable really useful functionality.
You know, it's funny actually. I think of the Flare not so much as an insurance protocol, but almost in some ways as this kind of universal connector, this universal API that we've kind of mentioned before. I think on the NFT side, we at Kinetic we invested in a company called Snickerdoodle that's actually making user data NFTs, and I can see how Flare would be useful for that by actually being able to bridge in Web 2 data and attributes information via Flare into these NFTs and basically create basically a network of user data information, especially using the kind of rich data sets that already exist in Web 2. So I think one of the most powerful examples of how Flare could be used, when it's fully articulated, is actually to bridge the Web 2 and the Web 3 worlds, the Web 2 data, the Web 2 kind of functionality into Web 3. And ideally Flare is kind of the great connector.
That's exactly what we think, and I mentioned it in my talk. You've got bridging of assets, and as you said, bridging Web 2 to Web 3. It's going to be very powerful. I'm aware of someone building an application on the network, which is around chess. There's 100 million chess players in the world. 100 million online chess players in the world. That's quite it's a relatively good sized market. And you can play chess on the internet, and those are open APIs. And you can get the result, and you can use that result on Flare to settle wagers or to do anything else. And that's really quite an exciting application. It's a great example of how the state connector can work. But as you say, rich data about people, rich data about your purchases, all very interesting application.
So if applications want their form of external data to come online, it behooves them to kind of enlist folks who could be attestation providers on State Connector, for example.
Absolutely. Yeah. Or they can run their own asset. They can run their own attestation providers, because the default set of attestation providers has to support everything, but they can then run their own attestation providers.
Got it.
But I would hope that someone like Blockdaemon might package it up for people to just run it out of the box.
Well, we were talking about bandwidth providing and making it easier for folks who want to do that. So yes, Blockdaemon is happy to help. Maybe a different question is, what does the Flare team need from its community? Like, how can we help you get there quicker? What makes this journey easier for you? Because obviously a lot of us want a lot from you guys. And so what can we do to actually make it easier for you to deliver all the things that we're excited about?
So helping us propagate the message is a really important thing. Talking about Flare, and that's on us to put out the best list of talking points, which is kind of what we're trying to do with this call, right? Is to re-educate people about what we're trying to build. And then really thinking about the applications that could be interesting. If you're a developer, if you're technical, thinking about how Flare, what functionality Flare is bringing to the community, to the ecosystem actually, and thinking about how you can develop on Flare and build something interesting. And we'll be releasing a grants program pretty soon that deals with all of our strategic categories. And then of course, if you're a token holder in Bitcoin, XRP, Litecoin, Doge, etc., we really look forward to you minting your asset onto Flare, earning the Flare reward in the process, and then maybe using that reward in crowdfunding to fund some of the most interesting projects in the space.
From my perspective as an engineer, we just want to see as many people as possible building on Flare using these two new primitives of the state connector and the FTSO, because in the end of the day, first, there's so much to do. There's no way a single team can build everything that's possible with this. It's like giving people the EVM, right? And then you say, we're going to build everything on it. It's impossible, right? There's too many possibilities. And it's the same is true for the state connector. There's just, you can connect anything, and it's a whole new primitive that has millions of use cases. So we can't build it all on our own. And the second point is that if people build on it, then it will be much easier to get feedback and see where the shortcomings are, what are the things we need to focus on improving, and what the next steps are. So it would be great to just see as many people as possible experimenting with the primitives that we're building, and moving forward together, listening to their feedback.
Yeah, one of the grants.
A hackathon.
Exactly. And one of the grant programs will be around event definition in the state connector. So building up a massive library of events, and these are actually relatively simple things for people to do. And so just helping us build a bigger and bigger library from Web 2 and Web 3 of events so that the network can come to consensus over that.
Speaking of Web 2, maybe it would be great to understand not just about Web 2, but other partners. I mean, you haven't really spoken so much about the kind of partnerships and the types of alliances and people that are already building. I mean, what's the current status of other projects and partners building on top?
So, we've got a number of DeFi projects. There's a number of unannounced DeFi projects that have, applied for a grant. Some rather big names in there. Some very interesting Web 2 to Web 3 projects. It's gathering pace very nicely as far as I'm concerned. Obviously, I don't want to, jump the shark on anyone's announcement, but we're very comfortable with how that's progressing. And we think that'll pick up pace even further as soon as we launch the F-Asset protocol. And how
about the ones that are announced? Maybe, can you just kind of maybe recap for the people that?
So sure, we've got a number of DeFi marketplaces, NFT marketplaces. What am I talking about? So we've got Sparkles, which is the biggest one, and they're actually doing quite a lot of business. We have Xtoads, which is a metaverse, which is started by someone I've met, and it's a really ambitious project. So they're working with a metaverse provider to get their NFTs into the metaverse. So that's actually really quite exciting. Fat Cats, of course, which as you know, my PFP is a fat cat, and I think they just had a mint today. So that was great. We've got Flare Finance, which is a DeFi protocol, and they've been through some various different things, but it looks to me like they're coming out the other side in terms of reestablishing some trust with the community. They've got some good plans to make sure that their protocols work well, and that's good. We've got a couple of sort of stable dollar projects and those kind of things.
How about community projects? I mean, obviously, I think that Flare community, the YouTube channel, is doing an excellent job in terms of just creating good content and making it kind of easy and understandable. Are there other things out there that you kind of are encouraged by, that you're seeing, or things
there's Flare community, there's Flarepedia, there's Mickey B. Fresh, who does a really good job at covering things. Of course, Eri, who we owe like the greatest debt of gratitude to, covers us constantly. So we have a really, really vibrant community. All of the FTSOs are unbelievably great. I mean, Flare Metrics wasn't built by us, but it's probably the place where I send most people to delegate their token if they're not running Bifrost. And so it's amazing to see what these people can do with just the limited functionality we've given them so far. I'm really excited and encouraged. If you watch our Twitter, you'll see that the FTSOs are all spinning up nodes so that they can be part of the State Connector attestation set. And so I'm really looking forward to hitting the ground running with the State Connector. It's going to be very exciting.
I mean, I can just again add from the technical perspective. I don't know who I'm allowed to mention or not, so I'll not mention anyone except for maybe infrastructure projects wise. There's quite a few that are setting up Flare infrastructure. My favorite is Blockdaemon. Like, I met some of the guys, John, in Paris Blockchain. I met Chuck, who's responsible for running the Flare nodes. Like, an amazing team. It's really great to see them run our infrastructure partly. But there's like many of those, and then on the complete other side of the spectrum, there's also tons of user-facing projects that have to do with NFTs and anything in between, really. And we like when I came on board, I was really impressed with the work that had happened behind the scenes by the founders to build all of these relationships and connections, and there's really a lot of traction that is still a bit under the surface, but like every day we are answering questions from partners and trying to help them set up the tech. So a lot is going on, and I'm quite excited about the next couple of months.
One last question for me. I think there's a lot of, I'm sure a lot of people are wondering about the status of the kind of airdrop and the token, and when token,
And
obviously,
Flare.
yeah, when Flare. What can you say about?
So I mean, I said it earlier. So July 4th, if it passes the audit perfectly, but it's built, unless there's some, it's built and it's operating. I don't expect there to be anything major. So even if we miss July 4th, which I do not expect, it's going to be very shortly after that.
We'll fire off our fireworks for July 4th then.
Exactly.
Which coincidentally is my birthday, by the way.
Ah, indeed.
What better gift?
Exactly.
It would be really amazing to launch this network, on the same date.
Yeah. You won't be drinking on your birthday then.
Yeah.
I'll have to drink triple then, I guess.
Yeah, the next day. Well, good. I think thank you so much. I'm going to bring some FTSOs in to ask us some questions now. I hope you enjoy the Bahamas and everything that that has in store for you. So be well. Thank you for joining.
It was great to have you guys here. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys.
See ya. Bye.
Thanks, guys. See you.
Hello.
Hey.
Hello, guys.
Good to see everybody.
How you doing?
Pretty good.
Yeah, fine, thanks.
Sparkles, congrats on your massive success.
Hey, thanks for having us, guys.
Awesome. So, who wants to go first?
I can go first.
That'd be wicked.
Awesome, yeah. So I know you mentioned one thing about a default set of attestation providers, or a default set of attestations that providers had to provide. Was there a reason, or I was just a little bit more interested in understanding why you can't provide single attestations? So why do we have to provide attestations for all the chains instead of just one Merkle tree for each chain? Does that make sense?
I think, as far as I'm concerned, one, it adds a lot more robustness to the system, but two, you're trying to get the attestation providers to all agree on a single hash, so therefore it has to have all the same inputs.
I mean, there's a possibility to do it separately, but you lose some security, right? Because if you, for example, bridge some asset from one chain over one state connector and move it to another chain over another state connector, if they happen to work separately and one of them has an issue, then it affects the other one, right? And so if you had like a smaller set of attestation providers for each separate state connector, the overall security of the system would be reduced.
That totally makes sense. I guess a follow-up question would be, do you foresee any scalability issues with having to provide a ton of attestations if those attestations or the integrated chains grows to a crazy number?
Max, do you want to take that? I mean, I'm fairly confident.
Not in the foreseeable future. So there's a possibility that Flare becomes, the blockchain of the world, that we might run into issues someday. But we already have quite a few thoughts on how we could solve that. Like part of it is around, segregating it into different state connectors for different purposes. And others are around regulating more strictly how much goes into each round. and having incentive systems and fee systems around that. So there's a lot, you can do, but I don't think that is something we need to worry about in the coming years, let's say.
Cool.
Marco, do you want to go?
Yeah. Here we go. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Hey.
We can hear you.
Okay. So no, nothing technical. I just want to a question. I'm curious. What would be the best sign for you as a team, as a builder of a network? The best sign of success in the early stage of Flare network, in your opinion?
Developers, people building on the state connector. I think one of the really nice things about the state connector is that it does enable essentially this use of data that hasn't been used before. And so we really do think there's a lot of really interesting things to do. And then obviously, all blockchains are compared to each other often by TVL. And so making that F asset system, which is the first cross-chain system we're releasing, helping that F asset system, build up a reasonable amount of TVL is very important to us. And we are going to be releasing a lot of education videos about how to mint F assets, and also talking to industry partners about them doing so at scale. So that's a big one. But one of the most important things to understand about the F asset system, so there is an in-baked incentive to mint your tokens onto the network, and that I think is very valuable. No other bridging system has that.
Yeah, I agree. Cool. Hey, can you guys hear me? Okay. Sorry.
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, perfect. Awesome. Yeah. Sorry, I was muted. I was trying to respond to your comment there, Hugo. Thanks for everything, the nice words about our team. We've put a lot of work in, and yeah, NFTs seem to be very popular on Flare. But one of the things I wanted to talk about in terms of what's different and what's coming is the F assets and the ability to purchase NFTs with native tokens, and doing it easily and in a way that still alleviates the gas and the eco unfriendliness of other networks. So that is something that will be unique to Flare, and so far unique to Sparkles. So we're excited to see the F asset system come out to play, and implement that for the users, and for them to be able to do something they've probably never been able to do before, which is purchase an NFT with Bitcoin, or purchase an NFT with any other of the wrapped assets.
XRP, Dogecoin, Litecoin.
Yeah, so that's one of the big things that we're very excited about and very excited to bring. And thanks to the Flare team on providing some grant and some help for us to really boost our development team and get all of this stuff ready for Flare's mainnet, and that's our ultimate goal. And yeah, so we're excited to see what that looks like for the community. We have our own call coming up. I don't want to use your time to chill it, but
no, please do. I'm delighted you do. I'm delighted
you do. On Sunday night, for my time, it's on Twitter, but we'll be able to educate the community on everything that's coming with we're calling Sparkles version 2, which will be a more in-depth platform with NFT analytics, all of the details that are sort of missing from what's in the marketplace today that we have. And it will be ready for the multi-chain experience for Songbird and Flare. So we're excited to talk about everything that will be there. And yeah, just the F assets is one of the huge things, and everything that you guys presented today was a great building block for the community. I hope they go and take a look at and listen deeply to what was said. And yeah, we're excited to go forward and see what happens.
That's wicked. Thank you.
If I may throw a question at you, Shane, what's your take on, like, let's say somebody builds an NFT bridge that is like multi-chain, like what you can do with Flare, right? What's your take on aggregating NFTs from different networks on a single marketplace versus aggregating the NFTs on a single chain and then running the marketplace just on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. We've been trying to explore more about what is available from the state connector in terms of the ability to bridge NFTs across. We've tested out a couple bridges on different chains that exist already for NFTs, and the experience is very poor for what's available. And there's no sense of collateral that Hugo talked about earlier in terms of what the experience might look like for bridging NFTs using Flare's protocol. So I don't want to go into too much detail about what we've tested and what we've looked at, but we're excited to see what's available with using the state connector versus building out the full multi-chain experience. And like you said, trying to aggregate that data into one marketplace and how it will look.
That's really awesome.
Great.
Mo, have we heard from you?
I think he's having some technical difficulties.
Yes. Either that or he's actually a robot.
So I use if you want, I have a question for you, because nothing related to Flare, but to you, Hugo, because users wanna know, the community want to know what is your favorite football club.
Football club.
Yeah. So
interesting.
We have some people from the community asking for it.
So I got to admit, I'm not a big football fan. If pushed to support anything, I would support Chelsea because that's where I grew up. But the sport I do enjoy watching is tennis.
Tennis. Okay.
And in fact, I saw Federer about a week ago.
Okay.
Which was rather amusing because my wife said, "Is that Nadal?" And he heard. And I almost died. That was wonderful. So yes, I saw him at a hotel the other day.
Yeah, they almost look the same. I mean.
Oh yeah. But yeah, Chelsea. I've been to a few. The only matches I've ever been to are Chelsea.
What about your favorite fan football team?
Sorry?
The fan-controlled football. What's your favorite fan-controlled football team?
Oh, I can't go into that. That's proprietary information.
Fair enough.
I think the fan-controlled football is like one of the most exciting things I've seen. And especially, I'm aware of their rollout plans for other sports, which I think is going to be really exciting. American football is still a mystery to me as to how it works. It seems to be the world's most complex game. Stops every 3 minutes or a minute or so. And they change the team. But yeah, it's an interesting game.
I think it's even less than 3 minutes. It's like every whistle, every couple of seconds.
Yeah, it's a lot of faffing around.
I'm a fan.
Yeah, no, it is a good game. It's actually, I used to, when I was at university, I used to do sports betting arbitrage. And American football was one of the best things to do arbitrages on. Because there's just so many different bets you can have on American football.
By arbitrage, you mean?
So this was back when, there wasn't massive conglomerates that owned every betting outlet on the internet. And so they had different prices. And so you could basically, if you were fast enough and you had enough capital, you could bet on every outcome and make a profit.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, it was good fun.
Yeah, definitely.
Gave me some additional beer money at university.
Oh, definitely.
But also meant I didn't do as much work.
You do it now, right?
Indeed. Have to pay for it now. Well, good. I think, Max Luck, if you're there, do we have any additional people to bring up? Or are we?
I think we're.
Questions from
everyone
Twitter.
Yeah, let's do some questions from Twitter. Now, I know one of the biggest questions is when S assets. I tried to answer it in the presentation. And, you know, as I said, S assets have been tested internally. It's going into audit. And as soon as it's out of audit and, you know, if there are any issues, those issues rectified, S assets will be launched and then obviously launched on Flare later. And so that'll be quite exciting because then DEXs will be able to have S assets and then DEXs on Flare will be able to have F assets.
Yeah, I also think it's very exciting. The whole lower house, hearing about the whole lower house, upper house, Songbird to Flare governance system. I'm really looking forward to seeing how that shapes up.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a really something that I hadn't considered when we launched Songbird, but I think it'll be a fun proposal. Okay, so let's just run through. I've got a list of questions from the community, which I'll run through. So how many exchanges do we expect to distribute Flare on the first day? Well, all of the exchanges on the website, or all of the exchanges that announced they were going to distribute it, you know, we will be holding them to that distribution. Dealing with exchanges is a lot like herding cats. You know, they have their own rules, and sort of as a project, it's impossible to make them do stuff. So the only thing we can do is put pressure on them, and the community can put pressure on them. But as they have agreed to do it, and it's important people know that they've agreed to distribute Flare. That's what they did. It was going to be very difficult for them not to. So we would hope most will distribute, you know, early. We're obviously talking to them constantly, and we'll be ramping those efforts up as we get towards launch. Like I said, they have their own rules, and they also have a massive backlog of projects that they have to integrate. And so they also have to get around to technically integrating Flare, and they can't integrate Flare until the network is up. And so that is essentially the time frame that we are restricted by. But we're going to make sure that it happens. You know, we're going to do everything in our power to make sure it happens as fast as it can. And of course, we want them to list us. So that's something else we're working at. An audit with Trail of Bits is scheduled for May the 16th. Can the audit be conducted only when the Songbird roadmap is all completed? No. The audits on the network, the FTSO, and the state connector. That's the audit for Trail of Bits. We've had other things audited, and we're continually having things audited by other smart contract auditors. So Trail of Bits is a really spectacular auditor for network code, for network structure. So we've got all the other audits lined up for S assets, well, F assets really, which is S assets. And then Layer Cake, you know, we're still, well, we're in the process, early process of building. The paper is only 4 or 5 weeks old. The good news is that Layer Cake is actually a relatively simple system to build relative to the F assets. So we expect that to be a lot quicker. Will there be rewards for minting equivalents of F assets on Songbird? So will there be a reward for minting the S assets on Songbird? Now, we've never specified a reward for that, specifically because it's a test network. It's a canary network. We want to make sure that, you know, that the technology works. We've never felt it was particularly fair to provide a reward for something where it's definitely under scrutiny and testing. So the answer is no. There won't be a reward naturally. We may consider a reward at some point. That would have to go through a governance process. But the answer, as it stands today, is no. The reward for those assets would come from putting them into a DeFi system, which you can't currently do. So it is its own reward. How and when can the asset holders submit governance proposals? Okay, this is going to be in the governance proposal for Songbird. There's some refinements I want to make for it, so I won't answer that question. But basically, I won't answer that question fully. But basically, you'll be able to submit a governance proposal through a website. You'd have to stake something against it yourself, and then others can stake to that governance proposal. But the specific system I'll be detailing in the governance proposal. Our attestation provide incentive from 20%. Sorry, the question is written very poorly. Our attestation providers paid incentive from 20% of annual inflation. Okay. Are they paid an incentive from the inflation going to the incentive pool? The answer is no. They are paid from, so currently, I think on the network, 100% of all the incentives are going to the FTSO on Songbird. On Flare, the 20% going to the inflation pool is going to the rewards pool. That belongs to the rewards pool. That doesn't reward people running infrastructure. The remainder is what rewards people running infrastructure and delegating. I would be interested to know who they feel are their direct competitors in blockchain, and what they have is different or better, blah, blah, blah. I think I know some of the broad technical advantages of Flare, but I don't know if the same capabilities are elsewhere. What do they see when they survey the landscape? Okay, what we see when we survey the landscape is essentially a really naive way of doing bridging. Let's set up a group of multi-sigs and let's put the responsibility on them to transfer all value across chains. As we've seen with all the hacks, specifically the worst one actually in some ways technically may be the Ronin hack, which appears to have been a compromise of the actual machines running the multi-sig. Could be something else. I'm only working on secondhand information. I haven't researched it myself. But basically there's no insurance. There's very little safety. You just have to trust the people doing it. And it's a really weak, generally it seems to be pretty weak. The systems that have tried to create some kind of decentralized network that handles it, they use their own token to secure that. The problem is if there's a compromise, there isn't any security because the token will go very quickly, down, and so it won't equal the value of the network. So it's kind of a self-reinforcing problem. We don't actually have that in the F asset system because of the way we split up all the assets from the agents. So it's a different structure. Now that the FTSO signal providers are going to be validators, does that mean sampling probability and consensus will be based on FLR SGB delegation vote power or perhaps accuracy? Nice question. It's actually a combination. So from last we spoke about it internally, it is the log of the vote power multiplied by the accuracy from my recollection. And that actually gives you someone else maybe able to chime in. Max. Can you remember off the top of your head?
Yeah. No, do you not hear me? Sorry.
I can hear you.
Yeah, it's the quadratic root multiplied by the vote power.
Oh, okay. We moved
at
that.
the moment.
Okay.
So that's what I'm going to do. Yes. So in a way, it's a system where you do get some more rating in the validation if you have more delegation. But what's way more important, a bigger influence, is your performance as an app. So people that contribute more to the quality of the data on the network will also create more blocks on the network.
Awesome, thanks. Next question. Where my Flare receiving address is currently set at an exchange, will I be able to change my address where my monthly airdrops go to after launch? With the governance proposal, yes, you will. So that's quite nice. But as the system currently stands, no. I would love to hear in layman terms how the Songbird network will benefit from all of the positive developments. Will people really invest money in the services of that network whilst knowing that it's a test network? Well, good comparison is Kusama. And as we said before, you know, the Songbird network will be used to test upgrades to Flare. That makes it more advanced than Flare in the short term. And lastly, you need the Songbird token, or assuming the governance vote goes through, in order to make Songbird part of the governance system, you will need the Songbird token to enable governance. So we think that there is, you know, that Songbird is long-term interesting. Will Flare launch an incentive grants program after the network launches? Yes, absolutely. Definitely a grants program, fully specified, exactly what we're giving grants for. What chain are we most competing with? We're not competing with chains. We're trying to tie them up. We're trying to connect them all. Yeah, definitely. We don't think we're, you know, trying to compete. We're trying to actually we're trying to add more value to chains by allowing people to move liquidity across the chains.
Maybe
Copper...
I can take the next one.
Yeah, sure. Go for that.
Yeah. So there's on Avalanche sub-networks and horizontal scalability, and whether we plan on doing something similar. I mean, I won't on Avalanche's model, right? But just generally, these multi-chain networks, they impose their tech and their framework and their protocol on anyone who wants to communicate with the networks that they support. And so it removes a lot of flexibility, and there's always some trade-offs. And there's really no need to choose. And so I think personally that approach is superior. And if we ever would get to a point where one network doesn't anymore, we can always just spin up another and have a state connect on both sides and transmit state between the two networks. So we don't really need to design something like some of these other networks are using. You know, hypothetically, with an amazing consensus algorithm, then we could just load a new algorithm and transfer all of the state over. So I think the state connector model is just significantly more flexible than what is currently on the market.
Cool. I'll do the one on Copper. Is Copper a secure and reliable crypto custodian? Well, we use them. So that's all I'll say. I obviously can't recommend a custodian because if anything goes wrong, I don't want you coming to me. But we use them. I can't. Someone's got a question about DOT versus Kusama pricing. I can't talk about pricing at all. Is the 2.5 times ratio for F assets to Flare cast in stone? Yes, it's cast in stone at the outset. Obviously, if an asset's really not very volatile, collateral against it, but 2.5 times is quite high, and that's what we'll be using. It's nothing to do with the price of the asset. It's actually only to do with the volatility of the asset. That's all that matters. And 2.5 times means that we would need a 66% reduction in value of Flare against the asset in 3 minutes for there to be any possibility of loss. That just it is possibly feasible that it could happen. It's not something that does happen. Is Flare equipped to navigate efficiently amidst the uncertainty of regulatory guidelines provided by regulators? All crypto projects are in the same boat here. We're as well equipped as anyone can be. We have a lawyer on staff. We have a chief legal officer. And so we do a lot of work with our chief legal officer, and we really try to make sure that there's as little risk of the project suffering from our actions as possible. Last couple of questions. Will F assets be ERC20? Yes, absolutely. They are ERC20 standard tokens. Generally, would there be, say, more developer talks, such as with NFTs and standards? Yep. I mean, we're working on docs. That's why we've taken on Dr. Xavi. And we want to we actually want to get more people to work on docs. So yeah, docs are really important for us. They will help people build on Flare, especially docs around things like the state connector and the FTSO. All right, well, that's all the questions answered, I think. Or yeah, that's all the questions answered. That is it. So look, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. It's been a hell of a call. It's been, I don't know how many hours, 2 hours and 27 minutes. That's a long time. So thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it. Thank you for listening to us. Thank you to our community. Really appreciate you supporting us and coming with us on this journey. And hopefully you now see that we're delivering something that you probably never expected when you started here. So have a great time, everyone. Goodbye.
Wow. There we have it. I thought that was absolutely incredible. So I guess a big thanks to everyone who managed to stay until the end. Absolutely jam-packed. I'm going to be dissecting this video and definitely giving you a bit more of a expansive description of everything that's happened. But yeah, what do you guys think? I think some of the notable things for me was this idea of being able to be a bandwidth provider and potentially, owning up to 37% on the assets that you provide. I think we already know this, but it's important to iterate that these bridges are going to be 100% insured. So there's always going to be the funds to back them up. What else do we have here? So yes, Layer Cake allows to scale linearly rather than quadratically or exponentially, meaning that we're going to be able to, I guess, add more chains without it becoming too complex, and that's going to be really powerful in the future to be able to connect all of these different blockchains. So any other notable notes that I have here? Yeah, I'd just like to finish on the fact that, the Flare network are really trying to connect everything. You see this here. That is their tagline, and I don't think that can be underestimated. There's no one else in the space that's connecting everything. So I'd just like to say a big thank you to all those who managed to stay to the end, as I said before. And like I said, I will be dissecting these videos and breaking it down just a little bit further for you guys. So yeah, that's it. Tomorrow we do have a podcast episode with the Cooties team, so be sure to check that out. Thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, I'm out.
Mission Control, we have liftoff.